The Second Vatican Council, as we know, asked religious congregations to look at what did your, I'm doing Reader's Digest versions of everything here, please excuse me. What did your founders want for you? When I do tours at the Mother House in St. Louis, I will always ask our visitors, what do you know about your great-grandparents' life? You may know their names, you may know where they lived, but you probably don't know a whole lot of other things about your great-grandparents. Now, come on, we had to go back to 1650. And by the time of the Vatican Council, most American Sisters of St. Joseph were heavily involved in institutions. We were working very diligently, but we didn't really get a sense of our history. I mean, I didn't, and I imagine I can speak for other sisters the same thing. But after the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council, the the United States Federation got a team of researchers together to go back to France to look at the early documents that we found, to kind of explore what was our history. What do we know about how we are who we are? How did that happen? They said that there were archival data in 67 French communities. So original documents were found 67 different places. They didn't, after Madai's time, he didn't say, well, I think we should start an archives. Yeah. And in fact, Vacher, this is a sister I heard speak in Le Puy last summer. She gave a talk on what happened to the French communities, but she said often a bishop who would hear about the Sisters of St. Joseph, it would not be a matter of someone from this convent or this community saying, if the bishop would say, I want a Sisters of St. Joseph in my diocese because of all the good that they are doing. That may have happened, or according to the Sister Simone, what also did happen was that they would get a copy of the Constitution and get the women who were already in place there to begin a community. That was new information for me. I just imagine that it's like, one of those plants that keeps springing off these different outshoots. So this archive team found these documents in 67 different places and tried to put them together. There are 4 sources for our background, and I'm just going over these because I'm not really strong in this. You may be, but I'm going to repeat it for myself. And if it helps you, problem. The primitive Constitution, there were 8 handwritten documents that the research team found. They collected those 8 documents on the primitive constitutions and synthesized them. The Reglement, there were 6 different sources that this team found, and they put those together. The Reglements did not stress organization. They were guidelines. The Eucharistic letter, I did know this, and you do too. It was really addressed to one sister and was really kind of hidden away for a long time before it was brought out and then looked at again. And the Maxims, there is the one original is in the Jesuit archives in Toulouse. The Maxims really predate the 1650 foundation of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Le Puy. At the time of Madai's death, he died in 1629, there were 34 communities in 4 dioceses. I'm going to talk about the French Revolution because I think it matters in our history and our sense of what our sisters went through. But, so in 1669, there were 34 communities spread in 4 dioceses. 100 years later, at the beginning of the French Revolution, there were at least 100, maybe 150 communities. The revolution, the dates for the French Revolution are given 1789 to 1799. Now that is 10 years of chaos. How did it start? In Paris, the storming of the Bastille, which you've heard of, and I think there were 7 prisoners that were released from prison. It was a symbolic act, and if I were going to describe this for a class, I would say, well, why did it happen? Okay, here you have a few people with everything. And down here you've got everybody else with almost nothing. I said, I don't know if that reminds you of anything. And then, you know, this mass, there's a reversal. So now you have up here in control, down here. What happens? Chaos. So early on, laws start coming out to reverse what people have been suffering. And one of the classes in society that is targeted are the clergy, the hierarchy, because the hierarchy, some of the bishops, cardinals, who have been some of them are heavily influenced by the king. They side with the nobility and the aristocracy. So of course then they are seen as the enemy. I don't want to say the enemy, but they are not friends of the people. So they are targeted. In 1790, the monastic orders were suppressed. They were kicked out. They could no longer stay together, the monastic communities. In 1791, all persons engaged in public instruction were made to take an oath of allegiance to the civil government. At that time, Sisters of St. Joseph were not engaged in public instruction. And if they were, many local places were more lenient and more tolerant of these religious women. In 1792, the law comes out. The corporations known in France under the name of secular ecclesiastical congregations, and in general, all the religious corporations and secular congregations of men and women, ecclesiastical or lay, even those solely dedicated to the service of hospitals and to the care of the sick, are extinct and suppressed, beginning with the day of publication of the present decree. Now that does affect the Sisters of St. Joseph.
What year was that?
That was promulgated in 1791. In addition, no church or parish of France and no French citizen may under any circumstances or under any pretext whatsoever acknowledge the authority an ordinary bishop or archbishop whose see is established under the name of a foreign power. And I read this in a book I told Sister Jean about. It's called, it's a book of saints, but the saints are not the saints that we ordinarily attach. So one day might be Dorothy Day, another day might be Thomas Burton, another might be a martyr of the 3rd century. So a day in July, I read this. In September 1792, this is the year that that law was passed, a mob attacked a Carmelite church where 191 priests and bishops were being held waiting to be deported. So they thought they were going to just get kicked out of the country. They were interrogated 2 by 2, and if they refused to take the oath, they were hacked to pieces. 191, and I think a couple of them took the oath, but the majority were martyred. So this is the status that the Sisters of St. Joseph are in. What to do? Some of them may have gone out into the woods and tried to stay in community. But they could no longer really have a visible presence. Many of them went home to their families. And one Sister of St. Joseph, who may be of interest to us, is Jean Fanfan. She goes home to her family in Bassan-Bassé. And one of the things we do know about her family is that they did hide priests. This was like a terrible crime against the government. And it would be as bad as being a heretic, a priest, according to the government. You would also be subject to execution. Eventually, this woman, Jean Fanfan, this woman who was a Sister of St. Joseph, is imprisoned at Saint-Didier. Now, this is Le Puy. This is, I can't read it, but these two cities, one is Bassan-Bassé and one is Monistrol, where Sister Jean Fanfan, Jean, was the superior, and that far arrow over there on the far right is Saint-Didier, where she was imprisoned. So her family, while she was in prison, would walk to take supplies to her. It wasn't like the prison officials were going to provide, anything. They had to bring things to her. Well, she thinks she's going to be executed, as we know, and she's miraculously, there's a miraculous change of power in this government that's in control, and she's released from prison, and I understand they gave her a certificate of good citizenship. Because she was so kind to the other, she helped take care of the other prisoners while she was there. Sister Simone, who I heard talk, said that during these 10 years of the French Revolution, things could not be called by saints' names. So if you've ever been to France or studied France, you know that almost every little town has a saint's name. So all the saints' name had to be changed to something else. Now, I do know that she told us about Saint-Étienne was called Armsville because it was a town that made arms, ammunition, different things for, I guess, pistols and so forth. So how confusing would that be? Where am I? I don't know, because this is no longer what I thought it was. Well, I had that feeling often. But anyway, in addition to that, there was no Sunday. The days of the week were given different names. So we would not observe Sunday because it was not, everything's secular. Well, so wait a minute, you're working 7 days a week now? What's that all about? So people have taken this upset of these 10 years and destruction, and eventually it's the period of restoration, where there's an attempt to bring back some sense of order. In the early 1800s, this woman, what I wanted to say about religion during these 10 years, it's dangerous to overtly practice religion, have any religious practice, so the practice goes inward. There's more of a contemplative spirituality than an outside, you know, I'm Catholic, let's kneel down and go to Mass or whatever. It's inward. Excuse me. Before I say that, I forgot about property. During the Revolution, any property that belonged to religious communities was taken over. Sometimes by private citizens or the government, but in Lepuy, their property was taken over by some soldiers. And they basically destroyed the inside. They would use like the furniture and any belongings that were there, you know, they would burn them for heat or fuel. And following the French Revolution, when this period of restoration came in that said, no, we can start calling the village by its saint name now. We can, you know, have a Sunday now. Well, what about these religious who have been kicked out of their property? All the monasteries have been closed. Well, the sisters in Lepuy, they cannot get these soldiers to get out of their house. So I don't know the exact connection, but somebody writes to a woman who has some influence with in Paris, who gets the wheels in motion, and she gets word back to the city officials, get the soldiers out of the sisters' property. So they were able to get those people evicted so they could move back into their property. But I also went on a little tour to Lavadieu, which was a monastic, a women's community. They still have a squatter on the property, even though it's this area is run by the French government. It's like a historic site. They still have a squatter's family there that dates from the Revolution. They really can't get them out of there. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So, following the French Revolution, someone says, please come to Saint Etienne, and let's begin again the process of services. There's so much rebuilding that needs to be done. Come, please, help us. And in 1808, Saint Etienne is very close to Lyon. So in 1808, the Cardinal Fesch, asks Mother St. John to go to Lyon to work with what's called the Black Daughters. Now they think they're going to be a contemplative community because it is, as I said, during the Revolution, this inward movement. Well, the Cardinal says, we need people who are going to be on the streets. So, you know, you were a sister of St. Joseph, please come and help them. Now, to everybody's credit, those women who thought they were going to be contemplatives did accept Mother St. John. They did accept the rule of the constitutions of the Sisters of St. Joseph. And we consider that I have always said, that's the refounding of the Sisters of St. Joseph. That's dangerous to say because it's not really accurate. Because there are it's like that bubbling pot. There were refoundings in other places. So it's not like, here's Lepuy, then that dies out, and then here's Mother St. John, Lyon, and then that starts from there. Mary McGlone is working on a book, and one of her cautions has been presented to her, please don't give credit to the other refoundings that happened after the French Revolution. So, I wanted to talk about